Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a short story because it is Short Story Tuesday, one from an author that surprisingly I haven't talked about on this channel before. It is a short story about a hitchhiker. It is The Hitchhiker by Roald Dahl, which was published in 1977. For those who don't know, and I feel like a lot of people know who Roald Dahl is, or are familiar with his stories aimed at children, young adults, Roald Dahl was a 1900s writer from the 1900s. I'm getting tongue-tied here. Who was Norwegian. He was born in the United Kingdom, though, because he was born during World War One, and over the years he became an author. He became known for writing literature aimed at children, although he also wrote some stuff for older adults. Some of his work is The Big Friendly Giant, Matilda, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie in the Great Glass Elevator, just a whole bunch of common books that many of which have been turned into movies. There's been at least 2 adaptations of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, one in the 1970s and one in the aughts, the early 2000s, which isn't as bad as a lot of people would have you believe. I think there's some certain charm to that movie, although it does focus on some unnecessary elements of Willy Wonka's past. But yeah, that's Roald Dahl. Unfortunately, he is also known for having been anti-Semitic, being a bit misogynistic, and also including some racial stereotypes in his writing, predominantly with the Oompa Loompas, as those are believed to have been sort of like he's been writing about like African tribes or poking fun at them with the Oompa Loompas, which is terrible. Despite being well known for and being seen as a fairly good writer, Roald Dahl is also known for some pretty hideous stuff too, which we should talk about, whenever that pops up, and noting that it's not okay to do that sort of thing. But without further ado, let's talk about The Hitchhiker. I will do a summary, a brief analysis, and we will move on from there. So The Hitchhiker focuses on an author. I don't believe we're given their name throughout the story, but they are an unnamed author driving through the United Kingdom, going from wherever they're at to London. They're driving a new car that they're pretty happy about. And as they're driving, they see a hitchhiker on the side of the road, and they decide to pick up the hitchhiker because they don't like when they've been in that position before, and they don't want the hitchhiker to have to wait forever to get a ride to where they're going. The hitchhiker says that they're also going to London to a horse racing, like a dog track, like a horse racing betting field, whatever it's called, but they're going there, and the author tries to find out what this hitchhiker does, but they're very reserved in the process. But eventually they do find common ground talking about the car, and the hitchhiker encourages the author to drive super fast to see how fast the car can go, and they do. They do that, but unfortunately a police officer spots them and stops them on the side of the road. The police officer is very aggressive towards the author, telling them that it's possible that they may go to jail, although the hitchhiker notes that that's probably not going to happen later. And the author notes that the hitchhiker is lying to the police officer by making up some elements of his past and his current job. And the police officer says that he's going to go back to the police station and look up this person because they think that they might have records about the hitchhiker, which the the hitchhiker just asserts that they probably don't have any records about him. But as they begin driving back towards London, the author calls out the hitchhiker about having lied to the police. And from there, the hitchhiker reveals, after having the author guess his career, the hitchhiker reveals that they are in fact a pickpocket or a fingersmith, as they declare that they are one of the best pickpockets in the game, demonstrating that they have stolen quite a few things from the author as they have been driving towards London, which the author is more amused and really surprised about than scared or something like that. And the hitchhiker just says that they normally don't steal from the poor, and that because the driver is driving them, they're not going to steal anything from the driver. It's mainly just the wealthy who get stuff taken from them. And as the story ends, the hitchhiker notes that they've stolen the cops' notebooks that they were writing in, and the cop isn't going to find the author or the hitchhiker because they probably won't be able to remember the names that they had written down or the car that they had spotted. And as the story ends, the hitchhiker encourages the driver to turn off the road so that they can go burn these notebooks. In terms of analysis, there's a little bit to think about with this short story. It's a pretty short story, clocking in at like 5 pages. It's a bit longer with like double text on the version that I found. But there's still a little bit to talk about. The first thing worth noting is the suspense that's in this story. I think it's very suspenseful because of the nature of the hitchhiker. I do like Roald Dahl's initial description of the hitchhiker, describing him as rat-faced and not very fancy clothes, kind of looking like just a weird human being, and just a very off-putting nature that doesn't want to talk about what he does. So kind of quiet and pushing away the author as they try to ask questions about what they do. And this is furthered by the lies that the hitchhiker tells the police officer, because he says that he's like going to a racetrack to do something about horses or something, and then he goes and tells the police officer that he's some sort of like bricklayer or something of the sort, and like it's clear that he's lying to the police officer, although the police officer doesn't know. So this man is very seedy, and you have to wonder, like, what's he doing in this car, and what kind of job does he have? Even as I was reading this, I began to question if he was some sort of hitman, and the big ending was going to be that he was going to kill the driver. But that's not actually the case. He was actually a pickpocket or a fingersmith, as he says. So I really like how Roald Dahl builds this suspense. He's very good at it, starting with the unanswered questions and then noting the lies, and then the author trying to guess at his job, like building up the suspense each way, and then finally culminating in finding out that the hitchhiker is a very talented pickpocket who might do even worse in the future. I feel like it's a satisfying sort of answer to the suspense that Roald Dahl was building throughout the story. But another thing worth noting in this story is the implication of the ending. The hitchhiker steals whatever they want. And in the story, it's clear that they've been stealing a couple things from the author without the author really noticing at all. And so because of the author, because the hitchhiker has been stealing, what's to stop him from doing that even more? At the end of the story, the hitchhiker encourages the author to drive off the side of the road, maybe go out further so that they can burn the police officer's notebooks, and then the police won't be able to identify them in the future or track them down for having sped or whatever. But again, what's to stop the hitchhiker from stealing this car. The hitchhiker reveals that he only steals from the wealthy or those who have the means. He doesn't steal from the poor or people who just simply got lucky at the racetrack. He only steals from those who have the means to make up for their losses, presumably. So it's interesting then at the beginning of the story that the author talks about this new car that they're driving, which sounds pretty fancy. And even the hitchhiker says, I noticed that that you must have a great job. Like, you must be a talented author if you're driving this kind of car. So presumably the hitchhiker knows that this author is a person of means, that they have money and from their author job. And the hitchhiker also stole a letter from their publisher. So figuratively, you would figure that the hitchhiker knows that this person has money. And so knowing all of this, the implication of the ending is then that this has all been sleight of hand distraction, that they're going to drive off the side of the road, and then the pickpocket is going to tell him to go burn all the stuff, and while the author is burning it, the pickpocket is going to go steal the car and drive off. This has all been sleight of hand distraction, revealing the truth to the author in an effort to distract him and make him believe that the pickpocket is on his side. But that's not actually the entire case, because it really seems like this pickpocket is going to steal the car, even though he said, I'm on your side, author. So I really do like the implication of the ending there. I don't know if that's what Roald Dahl intended to be the case, but it does seem like that's where the ending, or where the ending goes. And so if that's the case, I do like how Roald Dahl implies that and lets the reader, get to that conclusion, that this is not going to end well for the author, who's probably going to lose their car and maybe more if they're unlucky. A really strong ending, really interesting ending, based on the number of short stories that I've read so far. Anyway, those are my thoughts on The Hitchhiker by Roald Dahl. A pretty short story, but one that has an interesting ending and also has some pretty good suspense, even for its short nature. I definitely recommend that you go out and read it. I think that even though it's pretty short, and even though I just told you everything that happens, you can still gain a lot from having read it. I'll put a link to it in the description so that you can find it and have a good time with reading it. If you read it before, you simply want to comment on something I said here, do so. Let's have a discussion about Roald Dahl. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this story or Roald Dahl in general if they don't already know about him. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and hitchhiking travels. Farewell.